It's a real pleasure for me as a longtime fan to be sitting here with Aaron Gray.
Here with Larry Hama.
We're talking with Kevin J. Anderson, best-selling author.
Mr. Neil Adams.
I am here with David Britt.
Axel Alonso, editor.
Shadow Stevens. And Devil's Comic-Con with John Delancey.
Tom King.
Kevin Conroy.
Free comic book day.
Denise Crosby.
PopCon Pop Expo.
Here on location at Star Wars Celebration.
Cafe Expo, talking for our second time with Gil Gerard.
Wichita, Kansas at Time Eddie.
Producer David Gerald.
I've got Eric Flint.
Are here at Smallville Comic-Con.
Wizard World St. Louis.
VillageCon in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Michael Lombardi.
We were talking with Alan Dean.
Quincy Allen.
Suzanne Landon.
Of Starlog Magazine, Mr. Kerry Oakwood.
Chris Sabi.
Len Lee. Dave Schwartz. Mano Incarami. Jason Aaron.
This is Sci-Fi for Me, your portal to the science fiction multiverse.
The Immortal Mass, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure that follows a retired soldier who is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at denali's.com.
25 seconds to curtain, folks.
Your favorite podcast is Critical Plus.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeff Alt to the show. Jeff, thank you for coming on tonight, man. How you doing?
Oh, good, RJ. Thanks for having me on your show.
Glad to do it. I need to do some pre-show cleanup because I thought I had the older G-rated trailer for that campaign and not the red band trailer. So let me move that out so I don't accidentally ever do that again. Because this is a children's book.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, why did that happen? So I apologize for that, and I'll mute that one out later.
Thank you.
But welcome to the show. You are you're the author of at least 5 books, but why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are, how you came to be, the whole David Copperfield bit, and then we'll move into what you're doing now.
Sure. So I'm an adventurer, and my adventures really started as a kid reading adventure books. My family then took me to Great Smoky Mountain National Park, and I was just fascinated when I discovered the Appalachian Trail, which inspired me to one day walk that trail. And I did. And that led to my first book because I was being asked to give presentations about that adventure. And I didn't know what stories to tell. So I started to outline a format, which evolved into a book. And then from there, I morphed over into children's fiction and pitched the idea of writing a time travel adventure series through our national parks, and my publisher liked it. And here we are, book 5.
Yeah. So that's the interesting twist on this whole series of books is that it's adventures through, the national parks of the United States, but you've thrown time travel into it. So it gives it this sort of magic school bus kind of element to it.
Yes.
So why was the time travel? What did the time travel element give you to work with when telling the stories of these national parks?
So the premise of the book series is the father and grandfather figures are they take on the persona, the names of Lewis and Clark, and there's so much history involved in our national parks, and they're really remnants of a previous life before domestic everything. So so there's so much historical fact, even though this is fiction, and to engage children into showing interest, or to get their attention, time travel just has this magical flair. It's so engaging because then you can recreate the past. You're not just reading about it. You can smell the breath of that extinct animal, or you're wearing the clothing that they wore 100 years prior. So it just puts you in the scene instead of it being superficial and linear.
And the time travel involved with your books, this is more of a we're going back and watching kind of thing, not the whole super dense Back to the Future. We're going back and changing things around.
Right. So in the premise of the time travel is the mission of this family is that they use the time travel to learn about the past and to use what they learn to protect our endangered wild lands. So they kind of have a mission similar to what the National Park Service does today, only their mission existed before the National Park Service.
Okay, and their mission is very old, I would guess. I mean, or
so it goes back to around the Lewis and Clark expedition, and so now this is the 5th book in the series. But I introduced these characters in Lewis and Clark in book 1, which was based in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. What's exciting about this book in that regard is that one of the main characters historically surrounding Yellowstone is John Coulter, who was part of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And he was granted the ability to leave honorably from the Lewis and Clark mission on their way back from Oregon so that he could go trap game in the Yellowstone region with some other hunters or trappers. So that's really kind of a cool tie-in to my series itself. So that was fun to tie that into this book.
So with the characters meeting the Lewis and Clark team in book 1 and John Coulter being part of that team, do you have the opportunity to where they run into these characters a second time in the later books and he's like, hey, how'd you get here? I haven't seen you since,
So they don't really meet the Lewis and Clark in book 1, but the father of the two main characters has taken on the name Clark, and the grandfather has taken on the name Lewis. And when they do an adventure together, they call themselves Lewis and Clark in the spirit of Lewis and Clark. So
okay.
Yeah, so we explain some of the Lewis and Clark history from book 1 forward.
So some of the Lewis and Clark we know wasn't the same two guys, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So they loosely take. So every character, the main characters, all have what we call in hiking world trail names. So Tommy is really Bubba Jones when he's on an adventure, and his sister Jenny is Hugabug when she's on adventure. So Lewis and Clark are their adventure names as well.
So you got the idea when you were hiking the Appalachian Trail. How pristine is a place like the Appalachian Trail, or the other national parks, as far as can you look around and think, potentially no man's ever been here before? Because I'm here in the Ozark Mountains, and I'll go out somewhere in the woods here and try to see that, and they'll be like, oh, look, somebody dropped a bed spring or a can or something. We're everywhere.
There are some pristine wildlands that are uninhabited or never have been inhabited by humans, so you can get that. It's the Appalachian Trail corridor. It's hard to find. I mean, it's a man-made trail primarily. You do see the bed springs you're describing here and there, and old farm fences and things like that. But there are sections of the wilderness that yeah, you do get that feeling you are truly out there. And there are sections like the 100-mile wilderness in Maine, for example. It is truly the most remote wilderness you'll experience on the Appalachian Trail, and you really are out there. So you have to work for it to get to some of those places, though.
How hard? I mean, what kind of preparation do you need to go through to hike something like the Appalachian Trail? I mean, you hear people warming up for the Boston Marathon and things like that.
Yeah,
this is
it's
more strenuous.
And a lot, it's amazingly, a lot of people will attempt the journey without training, and they'll get in shape real time on the trail. So they'll start off really slow and in great pain and learn what they need to do as they go. I, on the other hand, did train walking on an incline treadmill with a 50-pound pack, and had provisions in boxes mailed to me every 100 miles along the way. So I logistically, prepared, physically trained, tested all the gear. And I'm glad I did because I felt, really ready. It helped build my confidence too. So,
now, did you hike it alone, or?
I did. Yeah. It's kind of hard to convince people to, leave their spouse or quit their job for 6 months, or an employer might not go along with it. So I may not have gone if I held my breath hoping someone would have come along with me, other than maybe a dog. But you meet a lot of people out there, and so you're not really alone unless you want to be. So if you feel like you need a social moment, if you go a little slower, people would catch up to you, because about I'd say a couple thousand people complete this journey each year, but about 1 million people step foot on the Appalachian Trail each year. I'd want to say it is so. If you think about it, it goes through 14 states, through some of the most populated states in the country. So you have people every weekend taking strolls, not walking the whole way, but just taking strolls near their home and things. So
with that many people and that much foot traffic, what's the degree of human erosion?
That's something that they have to maintain the trails and reroute sections to prevent the erosion. And that's mainly the mission of the volunteers now that maintain the trails, is to keep it in good condition. But so that my family experience going to a national park and discovering the Appalachian Trail is what spawned this idea of this book series, because everything I learn in every park I go to is all the cool, historical, fascinating things that occurred. And so I'm like, gosh, there's so much here. And there's so much like real, this natural, outdoorsy, earthy stuff that's so cool when you learn about it. How could I bring this to you through literature and make it fun? So I set out with that mission to let's engage the kids with very a very specially crafted book using time travel, engaging them with topics, and then I inject mystery into each book as well. So
that's what I was getting ready to ask about here, because there's a mystery to be solved in this book.
Yeah.
So you're not just writing, a historical. Let's look at what happened for. I'm going to say for kids, but what age range would you expect to be the primary market for this?
So the reading age is 3rd grade through 8th grade primarily, but I'd say 3rd grade and up, because I have an adult following on this series, which has been kind of fun. And I've written 3 adult nonfiction books, so I didn't expect that, but adults who like history and facts enjoy my books, because I vet each book through interviews with park experts, experts on the topic I'm writing about. I thoroughly research everything, and there's an extensive bibliography in each book that to back up all my facts. So if you like history, this book series is fun. As a matter of fact, as part of this, some of the parks invite me to come in, and I'll do walk and talks, historical strolls, and tell stories. And we will, if it's all adults that turn out, I'll talk more of like, well, here in 1920 something this happened. But if there's children on board, then we'll actually time travel and then go back in time. So it's been kind of fun to just really, do that with the books I've written.
I can only guess you would have to pick different stories based on your audience. Like, again, an all adult, when you can say, and back in 18 and something, Donner and his friends stopped here for the night and didn't leave.
Oh wow, yeah. So for example, my second book in the series is based in Shenandoah National Park. So next month I'll have an event in Shenandoah where we will walk out to where the Civilian Conservation Corps had one of their first few CCC camps, as they were called, during the Depression. And the president drove in from Washington, D.C. it was a publicity stunt for FDR. And so we kind of recreate the scene a little bit, and I bring some artifacts along and photos, and we're at the actual physical campsite, and it's kind of fun. It just kind of brings it to life for kids and adults. So it's fun for me too, because I have all the information from the books that I've written, so the stories just flow.
Have you ever done something on site where you're doing a reenactment and actually had like cosplayers or actors take on a role to add to the story?
Yes. So when we go back in time, I've had a park ranger who thoroughly enjoyed dressing up as a CCC boy, as they were called, because it was an all-men group back then. And he would just appear from behind a tree dressed in full uniform with the saw and everything. And he would act in character, because the park rangers are really good about that. They study up on their park. And so it's fun the more you have people you have involved, the more fun it gets. And my own kids over the years, when they were younger, would dress as my main the boy and girl character. And actually, they even signed books in character at book festivals. So that's been kind of fun.
That's very cool. Can you tell us what the mystery is? I mean, the kids are just going to the national park, and then something's like, we need to go back in time and see why something's like something.
So each book has a different mystery to solve. So, and another element of that with the mystery is we have a secret code in each book. Book one introduces the code at the end of the book, but the code is to protect the time travel secret primarily. But the family gets a new mission through a secret code for each additional book. And then they decipher codes throughout the books to lead them to the next task. So here in Yellowstone, without giving away the candy store,
right.
Now, Yellowstone is literally it was the first national park. It was declared a national park back in 1872, before the national park system existed. So it is the granddaddy of parks. So this fictitiously for my family, in the book, they have a family reunion in Yellowstone. And this has been going on forever. So they get an invitation, and it's a secret. It's a time travel family reunion. So you have to be kind of cloak secretive about it. So some of their clan, their relatives, actually work for the Park Service, and so they kind of blend in, And they get a second message that the family who's hosting the reunion needs their help. So the two kids are the ones providing the help. They're solving the mysteries, and their papa kind of helps them along. So what the premise of that is that helps. It's like the kids are teaching as they're going along. So the books give the reader like the whole book's premise, everything they do through the storyline, is everything you do want to do as a family when you visit that park. So the child could start suggesting to their mom and dad, "Hey, Bubba Jones and Huckabug did this, this, and this." But in this series, they're trying to there's 3 different families that once had came together way back in a reunion a long time ago, many generations ago, and they discovered that the time travel magic was even more powerful when they united, and they could do things that they can't normally do, but they couldn't figure out how to ignite that extra magic. So that was the mystery. So what they have to do from here in this book, in the Yellowstone book, is actually go back to. Are you still there, RJ?
I'm still here. Did you lose me?
Yeah, my screen faded out. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anyway, so they keep figuring out clues, which leads them to the next puzzle to solve. So so they go back in time to find clues, and so they're meeting their relatives from a previous reunion in the park, but they're cloaking themselves because they don't want the relatives to know that that's what they're doing.
Well, yeah, it's time travel and family. When you meet, you're like, "Are we related?" Yes, I can't tell you how.
Yeah. So they can never reveal who they are. They're supposed to be the least invasive they can when they go back in time. They're supposed to just blend in. So anyway, so they meet up with the 2 other families that were part of the original clan that was able to enhance this magical ability. And then they go through Yellowstone National Park together, solving this mystery together. So the mystery makes it fun. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt of sorts. But as you go along, you're learning all about the park. So there's two things going on at the same time. But everything they're doing throughout the whole storyline are the coolest things that families would want to do when they visit the Yellowstone.
So, do you have these books on hand at the? I don't even know if they had them at the gift shops of these national parks.
So yes, so the several of the parks do carry the book. The vetting process to bring a book into a national park is quite extensive. And I've worked with national park staff for many years, so I've learned that process. And it's hard for publishers to learn how to do that, but so I've built some good relationships with several parks, and several parks do stock the product. So, yeah.
One of your time travelers hasn't been very careful going back to these eras here, because I don't know if you saw the little news item a couple of weeks back, but this is an 80-year-old painting, which apparently has a Native American holding an iPhone in that little boat there.
Oh, that's funny. Wait, now where did you find this photo?
It was I found it initially on Twitter. It just showed up on the timeline as hey, look at this story saying. But I don't know. I looked at it and said, well, all these people are being tortured. And apparently, this poor guy is forced to read Twitter all day long. That's his punishment. But
that's funny. So when my characters go back in time, they automatically are dressed into the period that they go back into, and for the weather or the adverse conditions they're going to be involved in. So like when they go back they're up on a summit of a mountain there, and it's when it's extremely cold during the ice age, they're dressed in like hyperthermal clothing. They still can barely bear it.
Is that part of the time travel magic, or do they prepare for that knowing where they're going?
No, it's part of the time travel magic. Yeah.
That makes it easy. I like that.
and to some of that you have to just wonder, because if they time travel back to when there weren't humans, you kind of just have to. Well, it was really cold, so they should probably have this on.
Yeah.
And so they swim in ancient seas, and depending on which park I'm writing about. So in like my Grand Canyon book, they go back in time, and they are on a boat behind the Civil War hero that was the first to navigate the Colorado River through Grand Canyon, and they can't be discovered. So so they're and it was a pretty difficult task to raft that river. I mean, they barely survived, and so to recreate some of that's really fun.
So when they time travel in a particular adventure, do they go to a specific time in history for that place, and then the mystery is like being pieced together from there, or do they go to multiple different times for that location? Like, do they go to the Grand Canyon when it's like a trickle coming out from under a pebble, and it hasn't done anything yet?
Yeah, so depending on what we're talking about, yes, in fact, indeed, we do go back to various points in time, and it might be in the same point. For example, like in the Smoky Mountains, they go back and meet the first person to walk the Appalachian Trail, and that was a man. So Huggabug's asking, well, who was the first woman to hike the Appalachian Trail? So standing right there, they go back to a later time and to 1955, and they meet the first woman to hike the Appalachian Trail. And they went back in time to before a forest was clear cut, when it was original old growth forest where the trees were so wide you couldn't wrap your hands around it, or even get it would take two people to spread the width of the tree. And now today's trees are only like this wide, so they're flipping back to different points in time to compare and contrast. And so most definitely, but so they bounce around a little bit in the Yellowstone book too, where at one point they're experiencing a petrified forest, and the trees look so real, but they're dead. They look like dead trees until they realize they're stone, they're rock. And they go back and realize, well, these species of trees, they go back when they're still alive, and it was like a tropical forest, and there's no way they would survive in the modern climate. And then they learn all about what caused that was because of the volcanic reaction, things that for what the volcanoes did when because Yellowstone is sitting on top of an ancient volcano that last erupted like 640,000 years ago.
It's due.
Well, and that was another thing too. So I create some subtle fears that just the things that would be on your mind. We're on top of a volcano. Could it erupt? And so there are geologists constantly monitoring for any activity like that. But that also is the reason that Yellowstone is such a fascinating park, I have to say. I mean, you have over 10,000 hydrothermal features which exist from that volcanic activity.
You can't go there and not talk about the geysers in this book.
Right. Then the funny thing is Old Faithful is like the main one that you think of as the iconic symbol of Yellowstone, but there are so many other features, like even in the cover shot you had of the Grand Canyon, which is the
there's there she blows right there in the center of the book.
There you go. Yes. Yep. But then, so that's one feature. But then you have the Grand Prismatic Spring, which is that big, colorful circle.
Yeah.
Which that was probably my favorite of all of the features. It's just so beautiful and just so interesting.
And it's natural. My first thought was, who spilled oil in the pool? But no, it's not oil. It's
right. And then you have the Travertine Terraces up in Mammoth Hot Springs that, it's so unique and different. And then there's a road called the Grand Loop Road that you use to navigate all the way around this park. And this park is so big; it's like 3,400 square miles. It's huge. But then you're looking out at a field and you can see buffalo scattered about, and then there's the steam coming up out of the earth, so it's almost like from another planet feeling. This part I explored with my family, which even makes it more real and fun, because the first thing I do before I write is do the hands-on research. I go there and let's do everything that's recommended for a family and just see what's fun. And so if you have your kids with you, you know what a kid's going to enjoy by how your kids react. And yes. I'll tell you what, their phones were down the whole time. They were so in awe their jaws were dropped almost the whole way through Yellowstone National Park.
That's it gives you the perspective that you need to write a kid's book.
Yes,
to have the kids there with you.
Yeah.
Is this the end of the series? Or are you still going to visit other national parks? I mean, there's a lot in Canada. That's still North America. So
that's true. That's true. I have one more book that we plan to write. I haven't thought beyond that yet. So we planned out a series of 6. So, and then we'll have to decide from there, should we go on or not? So, but this park, it has a climactic ending where it could end at this book, actually, because something very big happens, but then there's enough of like, well, wait a minute, there's unfinished business now, because I don't want to give away the candy store, but they do solve their mystery, and they do figure out the magical powers, but you have to do something with that now, so that's where
once you got all the pieces of the one piece, you've got to go cash it in somewhere or do something with it.
Exactly. So that's what I'm kind of plotting out right now. That's one of the coolest things about fiction, is you can shape this any way you want to, and then I'm kind of the facts of each park are kind of my bumper guards. So I want all the facts to be real, but you can embellish the characters and what they do, and I just love that. That's just been a blast to write. So like you could take a piece of someone's real character and then go, now what if I added this? That's just so fun to do. Yeah.
How would this real character react to the presence of my fictional character?
Exactly.
And how can I have them react and have them still be authentic?
Exactly. Yes.
To what we're known of them.
Yes.
This whole series strikes me as something that would be ripe for conversion to like an animated series for PBS or something. Something along the lines of like Liberty's Kids, which my son watched a lot of that when he was growing up, and I thought this was all great and good until I was like, wait, this covers 35 years and they're still the same kids at the end of this. Something went wrong there, but there was still a lot of American history that they got covered.
Right. No, you could take this series in a lot of different directions. It was optioned for film, but the first book was scripted out. But nothing has happened as of yet. But so fingers are crossed, maybe perhaps something will.
Okay, well, film would definitely be a bigger payoff, but I saw something more along the lines of something animated for kids, because I think it would be more direct, and you could do the special effects are cheap in animation. Okay. If you need geyser to blow up or you need time travel sparkles, you just draw them in.
Right.
Real easy.
No, that's a great idea. And I didn't know where we would go when I started this series. I'm always open to things like that. So, right now I do a lot of classroom book talks, library book talks, and that's been fun. It was curtailed a bit during COVID, but I just did a book talk today with kindergarten through 4th grade, and they were all enthralled with the stories. And so that was
kids, plug your ears here for a second, because at the end of the book, you do get you have homework.
Oh. Well, okay. So being an educator, I realized the importance of did he understand what he just read? So having some discussion questions for the teacher or a parent or a homeschool teacher to kind of go through. But I give a curriculum guide as well. So and we also give a Lexile score. So teachers will they'll assign books sometimes or acquire books with ranges of Lexiles for different reading levels. So Yeah. So so I try to just to give a little extra, but the story itself, it's you don't have. I mean, it's a fun read. It's not like a textbook whatsoever.
Sure. Um, when this is over, or when you got time between the next book and you haven't really figured out yet, do you have other kinds of books, other genres, other types? I know you said you had done some nonfiction books, which I think were still national park related.
Nonfiction. I have 3 adult nonfiction. So they're 2 are travel essays. One's my Appalachian Trail adventure. The other is my John Muir Trail adventure with my wife across California in the high Sierras. And then one's a hiking guidebook for families. So very nuts and bolts, how to hike with an infant, a toddler, school age, teenager, and all the things to think through. How to hike with somebody with disabilities, a child with disabilities.
Yeah. How to hike with an infant. I think that's a short book. Don't.
I carried my daughter across Ireland. She was 2 years old, and we weren't going to go because we thought we can't travel. We have a child, and I thought, wait a minute, there's child carriers, and then next thing you know, it was kind of fun to plan the adventure, really, and that led to articles that from there on how to do it, and eventually a book. So
it's not like the pioneers didn't take their kids with them across the country. In fact, I pay for a monthly fee for Sirius XM radio, and I only listen to one station out of the hundreds they have, and it's classic radio. And I was listening to one of the old westerns, and it was like, they're saying, yeah, there's a small wagon train coming through, and they're like, that's weird, no kids on it. So it was like, it was a thing for them to, always see, half a dozen or more youngsters running around the wagons or hanging on to the clapboards or whatever. So it was noticeable by their absence. So yeah, I guess if they could do it, we can do it.
Right.
And better tech than they did.
Well, there's a lot of common sense, but science now. The younger you expose children to outdoorsy things, the more natural they think that's what you should do. And so, we're seeing it play out. Both our children enjoy hiking and camping, and that's because we've taken them with us since they were infants. And they do other things too. They play sports and do the choir and all that, but they enjoy the outdoors. And so there's a lot of kids that have never been camping, or their idea of camping is a hotel. So I wanted to break out of that,
or the backyard at the very least,
right.
Which was mine. But you said you'd hike through Ireland, and now I'm wondering, you could definitely go completely worldwide with this, because you could touch on immigrants, the immigrant ancestors of these families, and where they all came from.
Totally. Oh gosh. And wow, Ireland was fascinating. I mean, it was very Lord of the Rings looking along the way, just some of the ruins and cemeteries, just in the old ancient roads, it was, wow. You could really, I agree. The sky's the limit.
Yeah, and you've got things like, was it the Gadsden Giant, or there's a stone giant that's just laying out there on the ground. Go back and find out why. How'd this get here? Who carved this?
Right. But in the Yellowstone book, what was so fascinating was one of my favorite parts of Yellowstone is Lamar Valley, and it. Going back to what you said, is there anything out there that feels like it's just untouched natural? I would say that area has that feel. Other than the road that you're on, it's just vast, expansive fields and sagebrush and bison. And if you go out in the early morning, you're going to see grizzly bears and wolves and pronghorn antelope. I mean, it's just you just can feel the gamey wild of what it was perhaps before the Europeans came and went west and settled into that area. It's just a wild. Yellowstone, to me, the whole park is wild, but that one area really just struck me as wow.
Yeah. Now, do the animals that you encounter there, are they so used to seeing people that it's like, okay, we leave each other alone? Or like when you see a grizzly bear, the first thing I do is like back away real slow for a long, long time and hope it doesn't move.
Yeah, you don't want to be within 100 yards of a grizzly bear. You never turn and run, never encroach on them. If always stay in a safe space. So no, they're wild animals. There's more incidents in Yellowstone with the bison. People, you keep reading all that. I think 3 times last year it hit the news where somebody tried to get a close up picture. They're big animals, and they don't want you approaching them, and they'll hurt you. So unfortunately that did happen a few times last year.
Gross tonnage equals right of way, folks, and these things know it. Because where I'm living here is just north of Eureka Springs is Holiday Island, and it broke away from Eureka Springs about 3 years ago now, and they incorporated itself. It's a nature preserve.
Okay.
So I've got raccoons, I've got deer. They're all just like wandering the front yard all the time, and you can walk out and they will not let you approach them. They'll walk off, but if you're just minding your own business, they'll just look at you and say, "We're low on corn over here. You could toss some out," because I feed them.
Yeah. So the bison, you again, you need to keep your distance like 25 yards from them, and if they start coming your way, you need to back up and stay out of their way. Same with the elk and the moose, but in the grizzlies, in the wolves, you need to stay even further, like 100 yards or more.
Yeah.
And actually, I carried bear spray our whole time we were there, so you had something, because if you're out on a hike, you never know when you're around a bend if you stumble upon a bear, and you may already be within that too close proximity.
Yeah,
so at least
you turn the corner and boom.
Yeah, so you need to have something to respond. In the bear spray, it is an effective tool to use. It is effective. So, but
I was wondering how you protected yourself when you're walking alone and you have to camp every night. You have to set up camp. There are wolves, there are bobcats, things that you don't want to have one-on-one encounters with.
You're referring back to the Appalachian Trail?
Well, yeah, but any of the trails that you've walked.
So in grizzly country, so they recommend hiking in groups of 4 or more. Research shows that that it's attacks or bad things that have happened, it's been with groups of less than 4. So that's one big thing. So a family of 4 and carrying bear spray, and maybe having bells to make noise. Talking to the rangers to know, because they're tracking where there's been animal encounters. Checking in at the visitor center is always smart. Whatever the locals are saying, follow their advice. I've learned that. Now that's another thing is, so the Continental Divide Trail goes through a piece of Yellowstone, and that's another long distance trail. It's like over 3,000 miles from the Mexican border all the way to Canada. And so now, again, if you're hiking that trail, you're out there on your own. Matter of fact, more on your own than the Appalachian Trail, way more on your own, and through grizzly country. So we do hike a piece of that in this book, and it's near the Continental Divide itself, which is pretty cool.
Now, for those of us who haven't been in high school 40 years or more now, refresh people's memory on what the Continental Divide is, because we hear about it, but it's a geological something or other.
So the Continental Divide is where the rivers flow to the east on one side and to the west on the other side. In simple speak. Okay. And what's fascinating about that is Lake Yellowstone, which is not far from the Continental Divide, is one of the highest elevation lakes in North America. It's like over 7,000 feet, and it's just huge. And it's a cold lake, but there's the cutthroat trout thrives in this lake, but over way back in the day that they used to put farm raised fish in the lake, regular lake trout. Well, those lake trout are eating the cutthroat trout, so they're trying to. They're trying now it's open catch. I mean, you can catch as many of the invasive species as you want, and the lodges in the park will cook your meal for free. If you bring them your fish, they will prepare it for you. I think there's a setup charge, but basically they're going to prepare your fish that you catch. You're helping them out with removing the invasive species.
That's a deal I like.
The scientists were mystified because the cutthroat trout came from the Pacific Ocean, but Lake Yellowstone, it lets out to the Atlantic Ocean. So what they theorize is that at one point in history that the Yellowstone Lake used to connect to the Pacific Ocean. So
something dried up.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something about, like the lake was like right on the divide. So the water's always going in a whirlpool, doesn't know where to go. But no, I'm just. So anyway, with the continental divide right there, it's easy to see where, that's probably the right theory, because it may have just shifted with the caldera, which is the area that the volcano covers. That could have shifted everything. One good tectonic movement, you minus a river now.
Right.
I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, and we were always, told about, and I can't remember the exact history now, but there was an earthquake, and it not only rerouted the Mississippi River to where there's like actually a piece of Illinois now that's on the western side of it, Kaskaskia, but it also made the river flow backwards for a while.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, it's a real weird piece of local history there.
Sure. So when I put together these books, one thing I do is I look for significant things that happened in history, and so then we go back and experience it. So one thing was, at the beginning of the story, the first thing that they see is the bison, herds of bison, and they're just, and my own kids had never seen such things before. So they were like, wow. And then, so their papas say, well, they almost were wiped out entirely. And so they go back in time and they encounter a U.S. cavalry team looking for poachers. So because when Yellowstone first became a national park, they didn't have national park staff to manage the property. So all these poachers were coming in and killing the bison, but not to eat. They'd cut the heads off and sell the heads for, trophies to mount on your wall.
Oh,
and they were almost decimated. And this is a prehistoric herd from, ancient times. And so the government, ordered the U.S. Army to come in, and they served as the rangers until the Park Service was established. So they'd learn all about that, which is kind of fascinating. And then Mammoth Hot Springs, which at one point was known as Fort Yellowstone, and that's where the Army garrisoned at. But another cool thing, because this was the first national park, is the modern day park ranger uniform is modeled after what the Army wore back then. So the traditional park ranger hat that is associated with the modern day park ranger, that's where it evolved from. So
I can see that, because I remember what the old Army hats used to look like in Depression era pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
Are there any areas of the park that are no-go? Like, we don't let people over there, we want to keep that pristine, or it's just impossible to get to?
Yeah. Well, there's constant fires going. Fires are a very common and normal part of the Western wilderness. They ignite from lightning, and the lodgepole pine trees that grow in that area spark easy and burn, and that's how their seeds spread and they grow. So, if there's a fire going on, they'll close that area off. Or if there is a area they're trying to let regrow, from too much traffic or whatever, they'll close that area off. Um, there's the obsidian, where the Native Americans used to carve arrowheads from the obsidian cliffs. They kind of close that area off, so they don't want people taking the artifacts. But what, and that reminds me of something else. There are 27 Native American tribes that have a tie to Yellowstone, and that's a large number of tribes, and just so my characters go back in time and learn about that as well. And that's another thing is, can you imagine being that John Coulter who splits off from Lewis and Clark with a couple other fur trappers and goes off on his own into an area where there's 27 Native American tribes that maybe don't want you coming on into their area and might feel threatened from the European presence? That would be, I mean, he was, a true mountain man, if there ever was one, to go beyond your fear and to go do something like that. That's just, and he was hunted a few times by some parties that didn't want him around. So I can't imagine.
Well, folks in the chat, I want to remind you, because I forgot to tell you up front, so it's not really a reminder. The link to the Amazon listing for this book is right below the video. It's been there the whole time. You could have clicked it at any time and gone check this out. But if you're watching this on a replay or you didn't know it, now's the time. Go click the link and put this book in your cart. And while you're there, it is the 5th book, but how much of the first 4 books do they really need to know to get into the 5th?
That's a great question, RJ, because that's actually a popular question. You can pick up any book in the series and without having to follow along. So each book kind of front loads you at the beginning with the premise of the characters in time travel. And that was done on purpose because, some of these books are standalone in these gift shops, and you're in Yellowstone. Well, you don't want to go back and have to read 3 books to follow this book along. So I crafted it that way on purpose.
That's a great way to do it, because every book is somebody's first book. So, if you're getting the 5th in a series or the 3rd in a series, it's good to be able to just jump in, and you can go back and build up on stuff, but you don't have to understand anything.
Right. And there's 63 national parks. And so I've only covered 5 of them. So
you got a lot of books to write.
Yeah. So technically, if that's what you're going to do. So yeah.
You've got your career mapped out for the rest of your life now. And all right. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on tonight and talking with us about, time traveling through Yellowstone Park. Apologize for the glare, everybody, but there's a better picture of it. This is, of course, the advanced reading copy. You will not have a yellow band across yours. I like the layers of time across the landscape here, because you can see the teepees at first, and then in the very, 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 very far distance there, you can see the garrison and little I'm not going to say towns, but although there were towns, settlements, I would say, in between. So your artists that you worked with, you have a lot of discussion. And by the way, folks, there's art on every chapter here. So it's not just a big block of text here. It's broken up by something that says, "Oh, here's where I'm going now."
Hannah has been wonderful. I send her real photos and give her my vision for each chapter, and then she sketches my characters into the storyline of using my photos as an example. Same with the cover too. So, and I've worked with her since book 1 in the series. She's been wonderful. Excellent.
Well, good. I'm glad that you said that she's been there since book 1, because it gives it I like books that have a continuity of appearance to them throughout.
Yeah.
All right.
She's been a great illustrator. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you again for coming on. Do appreciate it. Sounds like a fun series to get the rest of the books on here, especially if you've got kids who are in that, age group where you need to be teaching them this kind of stuff. In case they're not learning it anywhere else, be sure to shove it down their throats as a parent, because they'll thank you for it later. I want to remind everybody that the mic stand is appearing over on the Mike Walters channel right now, so be sure to pop over there for your daily dose of niche news, everything in anime, manga, and professional wrestling. All goes together. And of course, the Friday night's historic comic retrospective, where we sit down and read comics from the golden age, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and we do it full voices, sound effects. We just have a lot of fun with it. So do check that out. Go give it a like and subscribe. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. So we're glad that you're here. By the way, you've been in the woods. Do they make a sound when those trees fall? And well, you're there to hear it. So never mind. It doesn't really work. Anyway, thank you for being here, folks. And while you were here, as always, we just hope you had a blast.